Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and I want to talk about something just a little bit different today. And when I say different, I'm talking about movie sequels as opposed to game sequels, but also taking a look at why game sequels are actually better than movie sequels. Now, I want to just point out the very first thing that comes to mind at the moment when I say movie sequels is Joker 2. And I have my own opinions on that film, whether you've seen it or not, whether you're into movies or not. It's entirely up to you, whatever. But the general consensus about Joker 2 is that, well, it's not as good as the first one. In fact, it's awful. It's terrible. It's a lot worse than the first one. And if you look at films in general, then that's the case for most of them. Let's take a look at some films from the past. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, which is better, which is worse. Weekend at Bernie's, which is better, Weekend at Bernie's 1 or Weekend at Bernie's 2. Airplane, which is better, Airplane 1, Airplane 2. The Hangover, which is better, The Hangover 1, The Hangover 2. I could go on forever like this, but if you look at history, every single film that has a sequel is viewed either negatively or horrendously positively. And to kind of go the other way of this, let's take a look at Batman. Let's look at Batman Begins. That's a really good film. What about the second one after that, which is The Dark Knight? The Dark Knight was considered to be the best Batman film ever made. And okay, yeah, look, if you agree with that, fine. If not, whatever, it don't really matter. But then if you want to take the sequel to that, which is The Dark Knight Rises, well, the sequel was bad. So whichever way you look at it, a sequel to that Batman, for those three, the trilogy, one of them is bad. Now, if we look at games, that's generally not the case, aside from a few. Okay, look, let's take a look at some of the few which probably do go with the films. Final Fantasy X-2. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Bioshock 2. Look, I love Bioshock 2, but generally it's considered to be the worst Bioshock. Tales of Xillia 2. I love Tales of Xillia. I love Tales of Xillia 2, but this one is considered to be worse. Now, okay, look, we've got those out of the way. The general consensus, as I said, for movie franchises is that sequels tend to be worse than the originals. And if you agree with me, perfect. Let's move on. If not, go and have a look at some films that you think are really good and tell me if the second one's actually better than the first. Splatoon 2. Is that better than the first one? Well, yeah, I think so. Super Mario Maker 2. Is that better than the first one? Well, yeah, of course it is. Assassin's Creed 2. Is that better than Assassin's Creed? Yes, of course it is. Mario Galaxy 2. Is that better than Mario Galaxy? Yes, it is. Dishonored 2. Is that better than the original Dishonored? You get the point. All of these games can be construed as the sequel being better, but why is that? I could keep going. Resident Evil 2. The Evil Within 2. Lost Judgment. Watch Dogs 2. How much more do you want me to go on with this? It's all falling over now. And yes, there are other examples that you could go further in. Look at Borderlands 2, Dead Rising 2. These are all examples of games where the sequel is better, or at least considered better than the original. And why is that? So, with video games, it's obviously a different type of media when it comes to movies. Movies can be very restrictive on what they do as opposed to video games, or at least historically. Now, you'll find a lot of the times that a movie gets made pure for the sake of money, just to milk it. And again, going back to Joker, that's the only reason Joker 2 ever existed, to milk the franchise for money. In fact, Todd Phillips, the director, even said that he didn't want to do a second Joker film. And he was kind of pushed into it, and look what happened. Let's look at something like Frozen. Frozen is a very, very popular film. My daughter loves it. Look, there's no denying that. And okay, if you're into that film, excellent, brilliant. I don't mind Frozen. It's okay. Like I say, my daughter loves it. Frozen 2 didn't need to exist. And yes, although it did well, it didn't do as well as the first one. Why? Well, because it didn't really need to exist. When it comes to game franchises, there is a story to be told. If we look at something like Watch Dogs 2, okay, look, Watch Dogs 2 didn't really need to exist, but it expanded the franchise more. It's the same with something like Lost Judgment, and to a lesser extent, Dishonored 2. But then you come into something like Resident Evil. Okay, look, Resident Evil is a bit of a strange one, because the sequel, the original Resident Evil 2, is considered better than the original Resident Evil, but in this day and age, where it's 30 years into the franchise, it doesn't really matter anymore. But this obviously isn't the original Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil built itself up on the whole franchise, and now it is this epic global thing that we all know and love. But something like The Hangover just isn't. There's only so much you can do with a film sequel. And I think that's the problem. I think that's why film sequels generally are worse than their originals. And that's why games tend to be better. Let's look at albums now. You look at, I don't know, the first Imagine Dragons album, if you've heard of them, and then look at the second album. Which one is better? For me, the first album was better than the second one, but that doesn't mean to say that any of the others are better. You know, that's something different. Blink-182. What about their first album versus their second album? Which one is better? Well, I guess it depends what you class as their first album. Cheshire Cat, maybe, and then Dude Ranch being the second, maybe. Either way, Blink-182 got better as they went on. Yeah, they had ups and downs. Linkin Park. Which is better, Hybrid Theory or Meteora? Clearly, it's Hybrid Theory, or at least the general consensus would be Hybrid Theory. And that's fine. That's completely fine. You know, whatever. This isn't about music now, but you get the idea. Every type of media that has subsequent entries in whatever it's trying to do is generally considered worse, apart from games. And that is the great world that we live in. Is it going to continue like that? Well, honestly, who knows? But that's not to say that every single sequel is better than the original. Let's look at The Last of Us. That's a really controversial one. Okay, let's not look at The Last of Us. What else can we look at? Shenmue. Shenmue 2 was just more of the same. That's a really bad example. Do you get my point? Every media franchise has bad points. You know, games have bad points. Albums, you always get anomalies as well. But generally, I think video game sequels are better than movie sequels. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you've seen Joker 2, let me know if you think that hate is justified. I don't think it is, but I genuinely think that the first Joker film was a better film. But yeah, let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.